I almost got kidnapped but didn't realize it until years later. Reddit. What is something catastrophic that has almost happened to you? Gosh. Back in the day I started working when I was 15 at a little pizza joint and finally saved up enough money around 18 to buy a set of wheels. No more rides from mom or friends. I was finally getting a little facial hair. And now I could buy my own ride. I was starting to feel like a grown up at last. I ended up getting a real clunker but I was proud of it. I daydreamed about swooning the ladies as I drove off the lot with it. On the very first night I had it, as luck would have it, it stalled out over some train tracks. Luckily I got it going again and spent a couple of days with my dad fixing it up. Anyway, one day I was driving and saw a kid rollerblading, so I pulled over to see if he wanted my old skateboard. I didn't really need it anymore, I figured. And I was trying to save this kid's dignity because once he got a little older he'd realize rollerblading would never be cool. Well, he flat out refuses a free skateboard for whatever reason, and then I see what I guess is his family walking up. And his dad looked pretty intimidating. I freaked out, thinking they might assume I'm trying to sell him drugs or kidnap him or something, so I just threw the skateboard in the back of my truck and got out of there before I became a registered 6 offender or some crazy it. TLDR. Possibly avoided becoming a 6 offender. When I was around 9 I went roller skating with my older friends who were around 12 years old. We had just skated out of our neighborhood area when I realized that I forgot something. So I skated home, which was literally 2 minutes away, got whatever and headed back. I find out that my two friends had crossed this small road while I was gone and had gotten hit by a driver who ran the red light. It was a hit and run. It was especially sad because one was a longtime ballet dancer and she was never able to recover from it. Years ago I was walking on the sidewalk during one of those Silent Hill days that San Francisco has sometimes. The entire world filled with fog. Every sound muffled. Still on the sidewalk, I turned to cross the street and paused for absolutely no reason with my hand up in front of me and felt something tingle on my fingertips. Something flat and yellow appeared and then disappeared in front of me in a flash at hip level without making a sound. It took me about 10 seconds to realize that what I had just seen was a taxi cab, streaming by at about 50 miles per hour, that had been unable to see the road and had driven onto the sidewalk. The tingle I felt in my fingertips was my hand touching the side of the passenger's side window. TL. Doctor, I am the luckiest methodiker on the planet. My battle buddy throughout my enlisted army career was a soccer star back in high school. He wasn't at all shy about it, and would boast about how he had been a starting forward on the varsity team since his freshman year and had a standing school record for most goals scored in a season. On this occasion, I was leading a 5-man fire team from a support to a covering position for a recently failed cordon and search operation which we were now aiding our sister platoon in bounding back from. They were under pretty heavy direct fire and were pinned down without anywhere to safely move to. We approached the enemy's forward flank and established covering fires from a concrete enforced traffic control point. After a few minutes into the fight, I spotted something blur really quick just off the edge of my vision and come to a rest in the middle of my team. I looked over just as my buddy rushed towards it, not even 3 meters from me. Then my eyes went wide. It was a Russian F1 frag, lemon grenade. There wasn't time to even yell grenade. He kicked it so damn hard, it did the Beckham bend as it exploded about 20 meters ahead of us and 10 feet in the air, apparently right over the enemy position. That would have been curtains for all of us if he hadn't have responded so reflexively. With the enemy now all either wounded or distracted by the screams of their now wounded, our guys were able to bound safely back over coverless terrain and out of harm's way. We then withdrew from our position without further incident. TLDR, army buddy kicked a frag grenade away from us, which took out an enemy advance. So it will be lost in the shuffle, but that's okay. I signed up to post this. Heck yeah. So my best friend when I was in 5th grade and he was in 6th grade was brutally murdered. We used to walk home from school together. He was a boy, I a girl, and I would usually go into his house for a bit just to hang out and eat Doritos. My mom never bought Doritos, so this was a big deal. However, for some reason this day I just decide to go home. No clue why. Later, around 3 hours later, I hear all sorts of sirens and stuff, and I run outside to see what is going on. I see that it is at Slade's house and start freaking out. He was my best friend. His parents are going insane. Turns out someone was robbing his house when he walked in. He promised he wouldn't tell. The robber murderer was a 16-year-old in our neighborhood who left, then came back and tied him to a chair and brutally murdered him. Had I gone inside, I would have been murdered too. Nothing like being in 5th grade and knowing your best friend was murdered and you almost were too. I still miss that kid and I'm 26. I recently looked up the murderer's name, and he is on some prisoner website looking for pen pals. I wish someone had shanked him. This isn't something catastrophic that happened to me, but still interesting. I'm 16 years old, and last year when I was walking home from school, I saw 2 little kids that couldn't be older than 9 were walking home a little bit in front of me. I assumed they were brother and sister. Anyway, me being so much bigger with longer legs, I eventually started to catch up to them. Right when I was about to turn off into my street, I noticed a car pulled up next to them and asked them to get in. My heart stopped when I heard the older one say, "But mister, we don't know you." After that I kept walking towards them and screamed out Lucy, Mark, because I didn't know their actual names. And they both looked at me. I ran up and said, "Guys, don't run off on me like that. Stay close." I pretended like I didn't see the car pulled up next to them and walked with them until the car drove off. They asked me who I was, but I just kept telling them to be quiet until the man goes away. When the guy left, I told them not to talk to strangers and walk them home. I explained to their parents what happened, and I don't think I've ever seen more grateful parents. Mine was a few months after I'd turned 21. I'm from India and frequently make trips from my house in Bombay to one in another state around 1,000 kilometers away. It's a 20-hour journey because I prefer buses over trains. I've been doing it for over 15 years and always book the exact same seat, 4 seats down from the driver on his side. This particular time though, I booked my ticket late and instead got a seat on the opposite side of the bus. We'd just stopped for dinner, and once done, I got back to my seat and settled down with a book. As soon as we turned back onto the highway, there was a big thud and a lot of dust and glass flying around. Turns out a truck rammed into the side of the bus. No one was hurt more than a few scratches. However, in my usual seat, there was a lady, about 5 feet tall, and there was a huge block of wood that was stuck over her head. If I'd gotten that seat, I'd have been decapitated. Was quite a WTF moment, and gave me some perspective on life. TLDR, didn't get my usual seat on the bus. Spared a decapitation. I was four-wheeling with some friends up in the Rocky Mountains last summer. I'm not from the US and this was my first time, so I was just a passenger. Everything was going normal, at least as normal as I think, yelling yahoo while listening to the Team America soundtrack, when we took a turn a little too sharp and high-centered on the edge of a cliff. It was like slow motion as we slowly crept toward the edge and I decided to put on my seatbelt. The car got stuck on a mound but wouldn't move backwards. I think the mound was the only thing that slowed us down enough not to go off the cliff. We were literally an inch away from plummeting to our doom. While America Duck Yo was blasting through the speakers. We don't let Corey drive anymore. I hope you see this, Corey. You are an awful driver. When I was about 3 or 4 years old, I was watching TV in the basement with my dad while my mom was out with her friends. We heard the door open upstairs and someone walking around. My dad told me to go upstairs and say hi to my mom, and being lazy, I refused. A few hours later my mom did come home and she asked my dad if he had moved some of the stuff in our house, because it was missing. We had been robbed. If I hadn't been so lazy, I would have gone upstairs and that guy might have taken me too. He also might have seen that someone was home and fled. But the other option is really scary to think about. I was driving down a country road at night. I saw a deer sign and decided to slow down significantly for the upcoming blind corner. Came around the corner going about 20 km/h as opposed to the 80 km/h posted limit. In the middle of the ducking road is some idiot walking and wheeling his bicycle. I stopped about 3 inches shy of hitting him. If I had been doing 80 I would have had to dig a grave. Finding out from an auntie from my dad's side that my parents were going to let my mum's sister and husband adopt me as a baby because they were childless for a long time. If the transaction happened, it would have been kept a secret. Thank goodness it never happened. The woman is a nutcase and the husband ended up divorcing her after they had a son. Their kid grew up whacked and feral, and my parents became his guardian. The poor kid didn't even know how to wipe his ass and had to be spoon-fed at age 10. So I was walking back from lunch with my friend freshman year of high school. We lived in the same neighborhood, so we were pretty good friends. It was a really safe place too, and awesome. Anyway, we're walking home and there's this old lady standing at the end of her alley. Old people do what they want, so we don't think anything of it as we head her way. Once we get near her, she asks us a favor. Can you two boys help me move some plants into my basement? Two things went through my mind. 1. Plants don't belong in basements. Not a lot of light and such. 2. I might end up like those plants, stuck in the basement without much light if I help her. So here I am, stuck in my basement without much light, but it's on my terms now. I was over at my friend's house, and they said they were going to watch a movie, and I asked what it was. They told me it was some new movie that looked really good, that it was about vampires. I told them I had homework to do, and it sounded mediocre. It was Twilight. TL. Doctor, I almost watched Twilight. Mom and I were coming home from the mall when I was 10. My mom says that she thinks the car behind us is following us. She makes a series of random turns, and the guy is still behind us. She sees a cop car sitting in the parking lot of a grocery store, so she pulls into the parking lot and drives up to the cop. The man then hightails it around us and out of the parking lot, flipping us off as he passes us. I'm still curious as to why he was following us. In middle school, I volunteered to work one period for the school library rather than have study hall. I got along really well with the head librarian. I would say he was the first adult that I thought of as a friend. He was really friendly towards me. A few years later, I come home from college on break and my mom starts asking me questions about him. Turns out he had been molesting boys at the school. TL. Doctor didn't get molested by a librarian. Now I have self-esteem issues. In August of 2009, I was riding at my local motocross track one evening. I was doing laps with a friend and right on straight into a 90-foot jump. Right as hit the beginning of the jump, my bike bogged and lost a lot of power. I give it some panic throttle, but I leave the lip without enough momentum and I had to bail off the bike midair. I slammed to the ground after about a 20 feet fall and still moving forward pretty fast. I ended up breaking both wrists and one required surgery. A couple weeks later, I go in for a pre-op blood test and I end up getting a call shortly after and they told me my blood sugar was really high and I needed to get to the doctor. So, it turns out my blood sugar was way high and I had been ignoring the only sign of my newly acquired type 2 diabetes. I was peeing a lot. If I wouldn't have broke my wrists, I don't know how much longer I would have gone on without knowing. And I don't know how much higher it would have gotten and what it would end up doing to me. So that's how breaking my wrists may have really saved me. Edit. As I read over that, I realize that it starts out pretty cool with a motocross story, but then ends with lame diabetes. Sorry for that. Same as you. OP. I wandered away from my mother briefly at an outdoor market and this middle-aged, heavyset guy grabbed me with no warning and tried to drag me into his van 10 feet away. I was a scrawny kid, so it almost worked. 2. Screamed my head off for help. He took off running. For years I thought that this was just something that happened to most kids. Ducked me up a bit when I realized just how close I came to being kidnapped. Edit. It did not help that my mother thought I was making it up and still seems to have no regret about that. Hahaha, that's funny. I was in a similar situation where I almost got kidnapped but didn't realize it until recently. So, here I am. White 8-year-old girl in Jamaica desperately looking to get her hair cornrowed. This was a one-day stop as part of a cruise, so I'm sure we all looked very touristy. Anyways, somehow I got separated from my mom and I found a very nice man who told me he could do my hair for me. All I had to do was hop in his sketchy ass van and he would drive us both to his hair studio. Luckily, my mom found me and whisked me away as I was getting ready to go with him. I'm an idiot.